welcome everybody to this week's episode of the RevOps podcast. I am, of course, your host, your one and only host, Jordan Henderson, the director of RevOps at Redlinger, and I am joined today by Brandon Redlinger.
At what company? What company do you work at?
We did rebrand. I am going to get that wrong 700 times. Everybody who's listening, Redlinger is now revenue.io. Super important.
Woo!
I am a senior, and I'm also the senior director of RevOps. I got it all wrong. I got every bit of it wrong.
Wait, is this another one where you're giving yourself a promotion here? What's going on?
How else do you get them? You know?
It's the easiest way.
But joined today by, well, you've heard them, Brandon, Jonathan. They're being super annoying already, so this will be a great episode. Go ahead and say hi, guys.
Hey guys, what's up? Really excited for another episode. We're off to a hot start.
Hey guys.
Strong to quite strong, for sure. All right, and so we're going to continue this week. I know we've had a couple of special episodes in the recent weeks, and super excited about some of the things we've been talking about. But a low-hanging fruit RevOps 201 topic today that I expect so much participation from Brandon and Jonathan that I don't even have to speak, which is super exciting for me. Today, we're going to be talking about marketing metrics to align your revenue operation. Imagine that.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of marketing guys here. Well, one RevOps guy, one marketing guy. Jonathan is officially a RevOps guy now. He's migrated over to the bright side, no longer on the dark side. Congrats. But marketing metrics. And so super interesting. And I want to start with, I think there's a ton of marketing metrics, right? And a ton of them that don't actually even help you align. It's just kind of like sales and CS. There's a bunch of stuff that's like, cool, it's like good to know, but like how many phone calls your seller's making is not necessarily helping me align my revenue operation, right? But one that it really does, I think, in a lot of ways, help you align your revenue operation. CAC, customer acquisition cost, super important metric across your entire business. So many ways to look at it. Who wants to give a definition? One of you has a good one for this, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, so CAC stands for customer acquisition cost, and it's basically taking your fully loaded sales and marketing costs in a specific time period, and you divide that by the number of new customers in that same time period, and that is your CAC.
I got nothing to add to that. That's
a pretty easy one.
22 episodes later, finally we found the one. Wow, blown away. Absolutely blown away. So CAC, obviously super important, right? Like you have to know how much you're spending to acquire new customers. And by the way, it's super important that this is an honest metric. I think a lot of people are like, no, we're not going to count like these three things because it's not really what we spent to acquire. Like, no, you have to be honest about your CAC. Otherwise, you're misaligning your business because you're basing decisions off of a flawed metric, right? And so super important to keep CAC honest. Brandon, why is CAC important to you? How do you use CAC?
Okay, but before we dive into that, I want to touch on something you said there. Like defining this is very important, right? Like you'll notice I said, it's fully loaded. A lot of people are really like, no, it's just the amount of dollars that I put in my ad platform.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, that's not even close.
Like, no, that's like 30% of your spend at best.
Yeah, exactly. So fully loaded means you're actually taking into account your head count.
Totally.
And it's blended too, right? It's not just marketing, it's sales and marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Same thing in my book.
That's right.
Yeah. I love it.
There you go.
No, I totally agree. It's your entire revenue operation, really. Like at the end of the day, and it's crazy because big companies are doing this, right? Like I was reading the other day that Aspiration, which you guys see, like they're a bank, I guess ostensibly they like invest for a better future in the world. They invest in like green things. They actually don't. If you look into what they invest in, it's actually like pretty terrible. It's like oil companies and stuff. But
I think they're doing carbon offsets. And
they are doing legitimately what they're doing. Yeah,
exactly.
It's not exactly great, but no. They exclude marketing costs from a bunch of these metrics. Like, how do you like that's just dishonest? It's just dishonest.
Exactly.
And your business is running poorly because you're excluding that. So we're on a whole tangent about this, but keep your metrics honest, like because you can choose to skew CAC, right? Like I could choose to say, you know what, I'm not going to include my AEs because they're not fielding marketing leads, or I'm not going to include my SDRs because they're just about piece upon the way. But all of that needs to be incorporated because you need to know what your honest CAC is, so you need to know where you can improve, right?
Right. So if someone tells you their CAC is X, don't just take that at face value.
How are you calculating
Right?
it?
Yeah, exactly. How are you actually calculating this? And then why is it important? I mean, it's really a growth efficiency metric. That's really what it is. And that actually tells me where and how I can be spending my money. If I have great CAC, then it's like, okay, great. I can pour more into sales and marketing to get more back. And then that way, or if I don't have great CAC, I'm focusing more on optimizing the different pieces of the funnel that go into the CAC.
Totally.
Right? So I'm not ready to pour more fuel on that yet.
Totally. And Jonathan's nodding, everybody, just so you know. To your point, Brandon, when I think about CAC, because there is no blanket good or bad CAC. Like that's the thing that I think people think wrong. Like, oh, we're spending way too much. Are you in relation to how much the customer's paying you though? Because that's the other piece of this puzzle, right? Like if I'm spending $1,000, if my CAC is $1,000 and my customers are paying me $1,000 a year, that's bad. But if I'm paying $1,000 and my customers are paying me $25,000 a year, it's a whole different scenario, right? Like that's an entirely different thing. So when I think about CAC, it's is it high, is it low? It's great. It helps me identify things, but like how is it in relation to what the customer is actually spending, right?
And not just in that year, it's also just the lifetime value. So if they're with you for 5 years, that comes into the equation.
Right.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things, two different flavors of CAC here too, because there's CAC ratio,
And
right?
CAC payback.
Yeah, exactly. CAC payback, and then your LTV to CAC ratio,
Right. Right.
which are all very important aspects of CAC that you should be looking at too.
Yeah. Yeah. Before you decide that your CAC is bad, you need to look at those things.
Yeah, exactly. Or before you decide it's great.
And it's good. Yeah. You're like, oh, it's great. Like it's only $500. Like, oh, but our average deal is $250. Like, oof.
yeah.
No.
Or it takes 24 months to get that back, and your average value or your average contract is not 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, even longer than the 1 year. Like, I mean, it should be a few months, right? Like, ideally, and if your CAC is above your LTV, I mean, Jesus, close the doors. It's over, baby. It's bad in that scenario, right?
It is one of those that investors look at a lot too, right? Like if you have great CAC and short payback periods, you'll probably get more favorable terms on your next round.
Totally.
And they will be more willing to give you more money so that you can pour more fuel in the fire and get, maybe you build in bullet terms on your raise and you're able to pay that back to them quicker and you just get a higher valuation on the back of that. Like totally. CAC matters a lot.
A ton. It also, so besides from like the top, right? Like talking to investors, talking to board members, talking to your C-suite, like who are going to want to know your CAC and they're going to want to know it's honest and they're going to want it to be healthy. Like, frankly, that's just all true because it's a very good indicator of the success of your business. It really, really is. The other piece of it, and I'm curious your take on this, is how to use CAC to then identify where to improve, right? And so I'm curious, like if I look and I'm like, you know what? My CAC is 5,000, my CAC payback period is 10 months, and my CAC to LTV ratio is 2 to 1. None of these are great. None of them are, hey, the world is on fire, right? Like I am getting my money back at some point. It's taking a long time. My CAC's probably a little high, so I'm probably spending a little much for what I'm returning. And my LTV is not as good as it could be, which is impacting my LTV to CAC ratio. So there's errors there. How am I identifying? Say I'm in marketing and I'm like, you know what? How do I know what campaigns to fix? How do I know what messaging to fix? How do I know where I'm spending too money? Like what other things am I drilling into?
Yeah, when I'm looking at CAC, I'm usually looking at my different cohorts too, right? Like enterprise versus mid-market versus SMB. And that's probably the first cohort that you look at. And then you figure out, what are they from there? And by the way, I do think 10 months is pretty good in SaaS for CAC.
It's not bad, no, but it's not great either. I was shooting for like, all right.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to say.
I want our listeners to aspire for greatness, Brandon.
10 months, that's it, guys.
Mediocre is not acceptable if you're a RevOps podcast listener. We want you to be great.
Yeah, get that CAC down, the payback period down to 5
4
months.
months. 4 months max.
4 months, Jesus. The first thing I would do is just look at my different cohorts, and then from there, like it's kind of what we've been talking about over the last few podcasts, but it's like put on your Sherlock Holmes cap and start to dig in. What is not up to snuff? What is not up to where I expected it to be, and then trying to figure out why. Whether that is sales performance, whether that is certain channels not working well, whatever. Something might be broken. The way you're calculating it might be broken. Whatever that is.
Totally,
there's a lot of things to dig into.
And sometimes you just got to let those things run a little bit. Maybe you don't have enough data to make an assessment, so you have to kind of get out there and get some budgets spent and figure out what's coming in, and then kind of evaluate after that. Because one thing I have seen is you start cutting the purse strings too early, and then your business stops growing, even though you may be spending a little more than you're making. But sometimes at first that's a benefit to do that, so you can get more clients and more lifetime value out of them.
Jonathan, what you've said is a really good point for everybody, and both of what you guys have said is breaking it out into segments, breaking it out into different groups, so you can start to analyze where you can optimize things, and you could even break out CAC based on sourcing, right? Like you could go into like paid social CAC is this, and organic search CAC is this, right? Like there's a way to do these things. It's going to help you identify where to optimize. It's also super important, and I know Randy Frisch was just a couple episodes ago, and he said never timestamp content. Absolutely timestamp your CAC. Like it is the entire opposite thing. And I say this is important because I've seen a lot of companies that are like, oh, well, our CAC is this. And they're measuring it across the entire life of the business, which is great. You should, right? You should know that number. But that's a really lagging indicator, because anything you do now, if your business is 7 years old and you're changing a bunch of things, trying to improve your CAC now, it's going to take years to actually influence that number across the entire business, because you have a 7 years worth of data in there, right? Whereas CAC, if you measure it quarter over quarter over quarter, is still a bit of a lagging indicator. It's still going to take some time to see those results, especially depending on your deal cycle, right? Like that's going to be a huge piece of that. But quarter over quarter is going to let you see, okay, I tweaked these 3 segments. I tweaked our approach here. We stopped spending money here. We did a bunch of sales training, and our CAC has gotten better. Quarter over quarter, right? You've seen that incremental growth, and that's going to help you continue to know where to invest versus changing a whole bunch of things, like you said, Jonathan, and then being like, great, it didn't affect the overall company's CAC, and like, let's just abandon ship too early, right? Which is hugely problematic.
Mm-hmm. And not being able to isolate variables is important. So like even something that's completely different, like with the fish tank, I'll bring up the fish tank. So you may
embrace it. I love it.
So like this is a perfect example though, because the temperature changes. You dose some iodine, you dose some certain things, and you do too many variables at once, and you see some improvement, but you have no idea what actually caused that improvement because there are too many changing variables. So the way you kind of understand what's working and what's not is you also don't change too many variables too quickly.
Only change variables that you can distinctly measure upon themselves, right? So like I can change some things on the marketing side, and I can measure the effectiveness of the conversion rates of the ads that we've tweaked, while simultaneously changing the deal process on the sales side and measuring the deal velocity that impacts, right? Like I can do those two things at the same time because I can measure them separately and independently. But to your point, if I can't measure it separately and independently, don't change 5 things that are one lump sum, because I have no idea which of those 5 things actually worked. So then in a year when they say, hey, what'd you do? I'm like, man, I don't know. Like,
something worked.
I guess we did these 5 things. I guess we have to do all 5 again to see what happens. Interesting. Well, anything else? What else on CAC?
I think one other thing that I think is actually important is actually looking at it on a gross adjusted margin basis too, because that'll actually tell you profitability, right? And probably
define it for us. Give us how to do that.
Yeah, okay, for sure. So you would take your average customer, like your average cost, divide by the average revenue per user times your gross margin, and then take that, multiply it by 12 because you have 12 months.
Okay. Everybody listening, we will make sure that is out. Make sure that is written out as a formula. There's
a few like parentheses in there.
I'm envisioning it, but yeah, like there's like a parenthesis here and a parenthesis there. Like these have to happen first. Totally. But like, no, put it in there. Alec Paul says, formula noted. By the way, I'm not wearing my glasses. I had to zoom in a lot. Wildly embarrassing. Oh no.
I hope we get that on video.
Yeah. Oh, it's on video. We will put that on LinkedIn.
Oh no.
I think it is probably something that earlier stage companies look at less because they just care more about getting users, and more as you're getting into your A and B rounds, where they actually want to know, is this something sustainable? Like they're not backing just an idea anymore; they're actually backing execution.
Yeah.
Once you're kind of at the mercy of your shareholders, it's a whole different game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's about measuring profitability.
Totally.
Because you're factoring your margins
and projected future profitability, and what it gives you the ability to forecast. Like if I dump this amount of revenue into my ability to generate revenue, like this is how much return I'll see on that investment, right? Because ostensibly you can scale that across. Like that's what you're looking for.
Exactly, and yeah, that's also where your CAC ratio comes in. So I don't think we ever defined CAC ratio. Did we? Did we define CAC ratio?
It's just LTV divided by CAC, right? Like LTV CAC ratio.
Oh, yeah. The marketing expenses divided by the number of. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. All right. So there's one other way I want to take this, because CAC is all of these, the CAC payback ratio, CAC LTV ratio, CAC ratio, all of those are very important things to look at. And they're very good ways to identify what to fix, I think, and where to make incremental improvement. And I think we've done a good job of sort of highlighting how we would do that, segmentize everything, go in and analyze how it looks across different things, keep it quarterly, keep it even monthly. That way you can track what your changes are happening in real time. Tweak things throughout the entire revenue process and see what impact they have. Only tweak things that you can measure independently at the same time. That way you move fast. Obviously, you want to be able to tweak 4 or 5 things at a time, but you want to be able to measure which one's working, so make sure you're doing that responsibly. Continue to measure, continue to iterate. I want to do another thing with CAC, because I have one off the top of my head that I know people do, and I think it's like the most horrifying practice. What not to do if you have a bad CAC. And the number one thing that I see everybody do is, our CAC was bad, so we changed our pricing. And it is a terrifying thing to me. And I get, logically, you're like, well, our CAC rate, our CAC payback period was bad, so we raised our pricing. Okay, great. That totally makes sense. Okay, your average customer is paying $500 and your customer acquisition cost is $500. Okay, double the price, and therefore I get $1,000. My CAC payback period is now 6 months instead of 12. Right? Super, super simple to see how you would land on that. It's super wrong. And it's wrong because it's not value-based pricing, right? And right. We did a whole episode on pricing, I think, and value-based pricing is obviously the most important way to price. Now, the nuance here is that if my CAC is bad, my CAC ratios, CAC payback period specifically, I might look at changing my pricing. That might be the catalyst for deciding, hey, I should take a look at this, but it can absolutely not be the reason that I'm changing my pricing, because you will screw everything else up. If I double my pricing, I actually maybe just get less customers, and great, my CAC is fixed, but I made way bigger downstream problems than I had previously, right? And so for me, that's top of mind of hey, don't do this. Maybe go look at it, but don't use it as the reason why you want to change pricing. It's not a good justification, because I can tell you that if you go to a customer that you're working with and say, hey, the price is doubled, and they say why, and you're like, well, our customer acquisition cost was just too high. They're not going to want to pay because of that. It's just, that's not the value they're getting. What else? What are other things that you're hey, just absolutely don't do this?
Yeah, if my payback period starts to slip and it continues to slip, honestly, look at what is one of the biggest line items in your marketing budget. It's your headcount, right? So is it because maybe you just hired a VP or a CMO or whatever that might be? And just make sure you're taking that stuff into account before you're hiring too.
Basically, right? don't hit panic without realizing you've screwed your CACs for the short term by investing in a bunch of headcount, things like that.
Exactly, and I mean you see this happen a lot too before either acquisitions or before any liquidity event. But they lay off a bunch of people. I'm like, oh, CAC is great.
Yeah. Oh, dude, anytime people IPO, you can watch them just minimize headcount.
Exactly.
But our customer acquisition cost is 6x, or it's divided by 6 months. You fired half your marketing staff. And then they do the creative things of we let half our marketing staff go, and then we hired a bunch of consultants and PR firms and blah, 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 and agencies, but those don't count because we're not paying them directly, right? They get all creative with it. But it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of big companies just become super top heavy, and they've got maybe 1 or 2 people actually doing the work, and then like 4 people managing them who don't do any of the work, and then that is a disaster. So that is definitely one thing to look at. And I think also technology spend is something you're also going to look at and make sure you're not spending too much on your tech stack.
Or even the same to Brandon's point before, like don't panic about your CAC without thinking, oh, I just hired 5 people. Same thing. If you've just bought 2 tools that are $200,000 each, your CAC is going way up this next quarter. It doesn't matter what you do. And your CAC is going to adjust very rapidly as your sales team grows, as your marketing team grows, as you buy new tech, as you do all those things. It's going to go up. What you want is that you can offset that by acquiring that many more customers, right? And actually doing that. So super interesting.
In the marketing world, there is just so much technology to get your hands on, and it's wonderful and dangerous at the same time.
It's dangerous to have you on my team pinging me once a week about something you want to buy.
Can we get this? Can we get that? Have you seen this tool?
I mean, man, we really need something to solve this problem. I get that message all the time. And it's always a different problem. And then he's like, this is a top 2 problem for us right now. Higher than the other 7 problems you've tried the last 2 months. I know we have that problem. By the way, we've been operating without solving that problem for 2 years. It'll be all right a little bit longer, I promise.
I got to drive that urgency.
I know you do, but you use that line a lot. I get that one a lot. This is a top 2 problem for our business. And you say it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anything else on CAC before we move on?
Geez. Okay. Well, maybe we'll save it for our 301 episode because we've already spent most of the time on CAC here already.
I only have one more metric that I think will be pretty fast, and then we have actually maybe a lengthy this week on LinkedIn. I actually assumed CAC was 7 metrics that we were going to have to talk about, so I kind of set that aside for the whole thing. And by that I mean I just didn't have time to prep this week, so that's what we're talking about.
This is us on low prep.
But the only other metric, the marketing side metric that everybody tracks to, I don't think there'll be a single person who listens and says, hey, we have no idea what we're doing here. If you are interesting, call me. I want to hear about it.
What are you doing?
I don't know how you're managing things, but pipeline, right? Total pipeline created. And not really anything to define this. We'll do a whole episode probably with John Miller or somebody that's much smarter than the 3 of us about attribution at some point. But essentially, when we talk about a pipeline goal for marketing is how much pipeline is marketing generated, or plus how much pipeline is marketing influencing, right? Those are 2 different things, but we want to measure and have pipeline goals because marketing is trying to create pipeline. Ultimately, that's the end goal of marketing, is to fill the funnel so your sales reps can close things. I'd love to hear anybody who call me that isn't tracking how much pipeline marketing is generated. I think that would be quite fascinating to hear how that goes. And I don't think I'm the best at it, so let's hear it. But we track the crap out of it here. It's a super important metric. How do you guys use it? Pipeline.
It drives everything we do. So everything we're measured on, everything we analyze, we make sure we're maximizing the pipeline we're bringing into the business at all facets of our department.
Very true. That is the absolute number one thing that all marketers should be looking at every single freaking day. And it's kind of like the thing to say on LinkedIn these days, that it's marketers should be held to revenue. I actually disagree with that. Marketers should be held to pipeline. 100% pipeline.
Yep.
Sure, revenue is a downstream metric of that, but as a marketer, I have less control over what happens after something becomes pipeline, right?
I totally disagree with the revenue concept. I think that's nonsense. Y'all don't get to close. You don't even get to convert.
Exactly.
The deal, right? And it would be holding the design team accountable for revenue. It doesn't make any sense. It's just nonsense. But what I would say, I think a lot of businesses struggle with this, and maybe they don't even acknowledge it. I have a hard time saying, hey, marketing is only accountable for marketing-generated pipeline. Because what that does is it creates friction in our operation. And I mean that because then sales is cold calling people, SDRs are cold calling people, and they want to get credit for it. Marketing wants to get credit for generating pipeline. And these 2 teams are now fighting over who created this opportunity, which attribution we'll talk about. But no matter how good your attribution model, there's always going to be a little bit of this. Like, okay, who actually gets credit for this? Or worst case, you have a great attribution model and it has firm rules in place that say, hey, if marketing generates the lead within 6 months of converting, it's marketing generated, right? Great. That's totally fine. That's super clear. But now I would have done if I told my AEs and SDRs if they want credit for it, they shouldn't call any leads that marketing generated in the last 6 months. So I've just disincentivized them, right? And so I'm a huge fan of actually holding marketing accountable to the entire pipeline. How much total new logo pipeline have you generated? And that's because I want marketing to help cold outbound too. Like ABM stuff goes into play, right? And if sales adds an account and starts targeting them, I want marketing to start sending ads at them. I want them to start sending emails at people at that account, tertiary them. Like it's a joint effort. Back to Jonathan's point earlier, one team, one dream, right? But if I hold them just accountable to a marketing pipeline number, I am creating friction by definition, by incentive, right? And that's hugely problematic. And that's the way 98% of people do it right now. I think everybody does it that way. And I think it's wrong.
And it becomes like sales and marketing aren't on the same team. They're competing for business for the same team. But
and sales rep goes, oh, marketing stole this. It was mine. It was outbound. And then marketing does the same thing. The same, like it is like, oh my God, like guys, just be happy with it. And the worst part about this is it tends to happen right after you've closed a big deal. So your sales team closed a $100,000 deal.
Who gets credit?
And instead of celebrating, you have to have an internal meeting where you all yell at each other about who gets credit. It's it is wasted energy. It is disincentivizing for everybody involved in that conversation. It fundamentally misaligns your revenue operation as a whole. And it just creates disgruntled people. No matter who gets credit, the other side is angry, right? Totally. So like, and then you get the caveats of like, yeah, like in the board meeting, we generated 2 million, but really it was like 2.5. There was some stuff that's marketing stole from us, and it's just nonsense. It creates friction all the way to the top. And so I'm a huge fan of total pipeline. Marketing has a total pipeline goal. That's it.
To add to that, I'd say one huge issue I've seen a lot of businesses do is be too restrictive on what they can qualify as pipeline. And then you end up kind of messing up your spend on the marketing side, and you're going to take paid dollars down, and you may stop doing certain initiatives because you're too restrictive on what can qualify as pipeline. Then all of a sudden you're losing business and you're gone a downtrend.
It's a really good point. If you're struggling with pipeline, is it because you're not actually qualifying the ops that should be qualified? That's a good question to ask for every lead source. Doesn't really matter, right? Because if I look at it and go like, hey, we are actually really struggling with generating pipeline, but like we're still closing business and we're working all these deals that are like pre-qual. Like, should they just be qualified? It's a good question to ask, like, right? What else?
I think that one's such a tricky one, and one that I think a lot of people get in trouble with though too, right? Because I mean, we kind of touched on this last episode, but it's like I know a friend who it's qualified pipeline as soon as the SDR books a meeting, whereas a lot of right, like is that actually qualified pipeline or?
It certainly hasn't been qualified.
You're right.
It's marketing qualified.
Marketing qualified.
It's marketing qualified.
But then you gotta work it top down and bottom up. You gotta say, are my conversion rates, are my close rates going up or down too at the same time, right? Because that's another reason why you pay attention to your pipeline is it will predict about roughly how much you're going to be closing in whatever your cycle length is, right? So if our easy math is if our cycle length is 3 months, in 3 months next quarter, if I'm short on pipeline right now, next quarter I can predict with relative accuracy that they're not going to hit the sales number, right? And then sales is going to be come back and yelling at me as a marketer, right?
And it's and on the inverse, you can also look at it like, I can look at our pipeline the next 2 quarters, and I'm like, hell yeah, we're going to have good. Next 6 months are going to rock.
Exactly, yeah.
It's going to be great, and which is a great feeling, and that's a wonderful place to be. I'm loving it right now. But for sure, I mean, like it's such a powerful metric. It's also so important that it's again an honest metric, right? Like just having it be pre-score, or even too early, too late to add to pipeline is going to hinder your ability to forecast, is going to hinder your team's confidence in their ability to hit goals. It's just going to hinder your whole business in ways that are unreasonable. So nailing that, like when is something actually qualified, is super important. By the way, fun story. Like 10 years ago when I was first starting out in operations, I did sales ops and CS ops, and then I sort of like absorbed marketing, and we had like 2 marketers at like a 120 person customer, and they were just drowning all the time.
God.
And yeah, there was just absolute chaos. They kept sending me things like, and I was a lawyer before that, so I had no idea what marketing was, right? Like lawyers don't market. Unless you're a social security lawyer, it doesn't happen. One of the marketers kept saying like, "Oh, we're giving you like these marketing qualified leads," and in my mind, it took me like a month to realize that meant he wasn't calling them and qualifying them. Because I'm like, why would you call it qualified if you didn't like qualify them? And he's like, "No, it just meets our definition." I'm like, it's a weird phrase. I don't like this. I still don't like it. Like internally, I don't like that we use qualified for that, but whatever. Common nomenclature. I get it. Fine. Bit of a tangent today. Bit of a rant. I'm passionate about the pipeline one. Any other thoughts on this?
I mean,
every time I ask that, you look like you have like 43 things.
I know. It's like, oh my God. Like, what do I want to say? What do I
peeking out of you right now? All right, moving on.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Yeah, that what else question could get you.
Yeah, it's like, Jesus Christ, what else do I want to say here? Where do I start?
Oh, you guys haven't done nearly enough sales training to understand the what else's and the leading questions. All right. This week on LinkedIn, I actually have to put my glasses on because this is a very long question, but I've actually met this person in person and asked some question. Alec, you're the nerd. Our producer just called me a nerd in the chat, and I don't appreciate it. All right, so this week's question comes from David. We use a sales engagement platform for semi-cold and cold outbound. Currently, the platform is set up to push any new name into Salesforce as a lead. And we then add a raw status to keep that person out of the marketing-generated funnel. They then are worked through the stages, bypassing MQL and eventually being converted into an op. My marketing head is pushing back and wants to have those go in as a contact until they show interest, which would then have the AE create a lead from the contact, run it through the lead stages, then convert and match it back to the contact when creating the account and opportunity. I've never seen this before.
No.
Is this a method we should consider?
No. I answered before you even asked.
Yeah, exactly.
I explain why though. David needs to know why. When I read this, I was like, oh man, I just a visceral reaction to this. But
yeah.
Like,
so you guys know how I feel about data, and that is just creating a data mess. Oh my God. The duplications, like you've got systems that are connecting to your CRM that need to see one record, not 2. So you've got 2 records. All of a sudden you've got data in 2 places. You've got 2 people calling them. Don't do that. That is just a disaster.
Also, like creating a duplicate and then converting it back in, you'd have to give crazy permissions in Salesforce just so people could dedupe, period, because everybody would have to be empowered to do that, which would be nuts. And like your the data wouldn't map over when you convert, because only certain things map over. That's going to be unmanageable, just absolutely untenable. It also is going to flaw all of your reporting because you're going to have leads and contacts in both buckets, and you're reporting on them twice. And when you're looking at sales and marketing, that's going to be absolute nonsense as well. And it's going to be a terrible workflow for your sellers that they're just not going to follow to begin with because it's just not going to work. And so yeah, I mean, absolute no.
You need a single view of the customer, not a multi-view of the customer.
Right. And what I would recommend, and you guys could tell me this, your thoughts on it, is you're actually doing it wrong now too. You shouldn't have your sales enablement platform also be creating leads. Marketing creates leads.
Totally.
Sales enablement platform creates contacts. Like they delineate those 2 things, and when a lead converts to having a conversation, they become a contact. That is how Salesforce is built.
Yeah.
It's actually designed to do this. And so that's a simple fix, but in my mind, even just having it right now, they're having it created as a lead. Switch that. Have them created as a contact. All sales created contacts are contacts, and all marketing created contacts are leads until they take a meeting, convert, whatever, right?
Yeah, it just sounds like this is a friction creator too, like we were talking about earlier. Like this is just gonna be sales versus marketing. You're gonna create a whole bunch of friction between your departments.
Right. and I'm going to create data that I lose when I convert it. Because I don't know if people know this, but when you convert marketing is going to add a bunch of data to that lead. And then when they convert it back into the contact and dedupe it, you're going to merge data over across each other, and you're going to lose some of that marketing data, and you're going to hit that friction point where marketing is like, well, no, but they did these campaigns. It's just not on the record. Or the inverse, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
And maybe that's what sales wants. Maybe they know that, and that's why they want to do this.
Maybe it's the marketing head pushing back and wanting this. Just,
okay.
You know,
Get a new head of marketing is my advice.
That's a bold thing. He now cannot send this episode to his team.
That was.
But sort of giving all this, it's a really easy fix. Have it created as contacts, have it created as leads. By the way, the other thing that's super easy, if anybody's like, oh, we want it to be a lead, we want to do this thing. The most simple way to think about this is your sales team is already calling this person, right? They're already trying to reach out to him and do this. And if you create a lead, there's a high probability that somebody else is also going to start calling and emailing that same person, because they're going to be a duplicate in your org. And you're going to have two sellers going after the same person, or worse, that person's going to get email from sales, and then 6 minutes later, they're going to get a marketing email that's totally unrelated. And it's just a really bad buyer's experience. And you are creating that risk. And you might think, oh, we don't do it at scale that's going to happen. It will absolutely happen. It'll happen probably in the first week, and it'll happen 30 times a week after that. And once you've screwed up with that customer, they're never going to buy from you. You've burned it forever.
Yep.
And so... And you know what that's going to do? It's going to screw your CAC. Just saying.
Yeah, I think it all starts with just marketing and sales having that relationship. That CMO and that CSO need to get together and come up with a game plan as far as how they're going to work these leads. But isolating them out and doing your own thing on each side of the fence is not the answer. No,
it's terrible. It's misalignment. It's intentionally misaligning. Totally agree. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, David, you're welcome. Don't send this episode to your marketing head. We were totally joking. Marketing guy, keep him there. We love him. We hope he talks to us, gives us the next question. Awesome.
Good luck.
All right, everybody. Good luck. Yeah, good luck. Thank you, everybody, for joining in this week. I know it's a fun episode for me, at least. And follow us on social. Give us 5 stars on Apple. If you're still here and you're not happy about us, message me. Don't give us 1 star. I'm sorry. Sorry, marketing head. Don't go give us 1 star. We love you. Follow us all on social and send us your This Week on LinkedIn questions so we can answer them without burning bridges for you in the future. Cool. Anything else, guys?
Only that I have so much anxiety that we didn't talk about a lot of stuff on the pipeline episode. We'll do another episode on pipeline. I'm like, it's going through my head. It's like, oh my God, there's so much we can talk about still.
I feel like you've just volunteered to host an episode.
Totally.
Yeah. I think we're going to do an episode where you host. We've had, by the way, there's been one episode where I didn't host, which everybody will have heard by now.
Yeah.
Which I'm welcome to other times not doing, although I will still be the host, just so you know. But yeah, I think we've signed you up. You're hosting an episode on Pipeline.
Deal.
Just don't make me host. I'll feel like Garth on Wayne's World, just sitting there all silent.
Nice. Even that joke landed about as well as you hosting would. So.
Wayne.
All right, till next time, guys.
See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.